Let's do this, Dave Rubin, and then we'll take some phone calls.
Nasty guy.
This is the thing about Dave Rubin, and this is the analogy that I've come up with. So Dave Rubin has been walking on eggshells for quite some time because when he was on the Blaze, people didn't necessarily he would talk about being a gay man, but I don't think he wouldn't put it out in front, and he was it was, effective insofar as even the gay guy, has a problem with this. And, but then he made the mistake of thinking that, despite the fact that his buddy, Ben Shapiro would not have attended his wedding and would be nervous about inviting him over for dinner with his husband.
Good friends.
He thought I know my audience will love the fact that I'm becoming a dad. And my husband and I are having 2 kids through a surrogate and twins, and we're going to be dads. My audience will love this. Well, it turned out his audience really didn't love it.
Yeah.
In fact, they thought it was heresy, literally.
Satan.
And so he went all in on DeSantis.
Yep, I was going to say, don't forget the DeSantis part of the being boxed
He went
in.
all in on DeSantis and was convinced and was telling his audience this is the guy to watch. I've got a super feeling about this, and you know how my feelings go.
They want Trump. They don't want to go against Ron DeSantis.
Yeah, he bet on the wrong horse in his hooves.
Oh my gosh. But in a way that is almost catastrophic. I don't think there's ever been a candidate that has had this sort of much of a, he
was doing campaign events.
Usually when there's a bunch of people running, it's hard to be the loser. That's the thing about why, so many people jumped into the race, because if there's so many people in the race, you're not the loser. There's just a winner and there's no loser. Who lost the 2016 race against Trump? Maybe you could say Jeb Bush, right. But really so many people lost that there was no one loser. The loser in this campaign is not going to be Nikki Haley. The loser is Ron DeSantis.
Yeah, tripping over his own feet.
Totally. And so Dave Rubin is walking on eggshells. He doesn't want to remind anybody of, that he's part of the culture war and he's doing something that is against God. So he doesn't want to bring up anything that would evoke family or family values or any of that part of the culture. And he doesn't want to talk about anything that's too political pontificating, because he just made a catastrophic failed bet.
His fields for commentary are really narrowing down. What is he going to talk about at this point?
What is he going to talk about? Well, he found it. And it's imagine if you owned a dog.
Yeah.
And you kept it in your apartment in New York City. And then one day you had the opportunity to go out into the country and take its leash off. And this I give you is Dave Rubin.
Yeah, they're racism zoomies.
Exactly.
.com, and we have a jam-packed Monday show for you. There is a lot going on. I even bulleted it out for you. We've got Ilhan Omar, who's basically a terrorist. We have a terrorist in the government. I'm sorry, I don't know how to tell you any other way. She's here to destroy America. She gave a big speech over the weekend that's now catching fire across the internet. Of course, the other big thing is
Yeah. We're going to skip forward because we're going to get to this blockbuster. We've got a terrorist.
He's really reinventing the wheel here, calling Ilhan Omar a terrorist.
Now, let's be clear. When did this video come out? Before or after? Oh, last week.
Yeah.
And this is based upon the what we now know is the false translation of a speech she gave. Now, even if the speech was real, we have to believe that she has been a sleeper cell for Somalia. In the government, because Somalia's influence on the U.S. is just
Joe Biden marches for Somalia.
Crazy. Yeah. We know how much the SAPAC is dumping into races.
$40 million going against people against Somalia.
Yeah, exactly. But here we go.
And that orange man, and then, as I am one to do, I will give you some hope at the end of the show. So let's just dive right in. This speech is completely bananas. There are many clips of it. We're only going to show you one portion of her talking. But Ilhan Omar was given a speech at a Somalian event, And here she is. I don't even want to color this. Just listen to what she says. Of course, this is going to be in, you're going to have to read the translation. Here we go.
Oh, so yeah, we can skip over the false translation that he plays there.
Yes, this is all fake translation.
And then
where do we make sure you cue up the
real
correction? No, the correction that he gives too. I want to play that.
Oh,
okay, yeah, I'll get on that. Look at that.
A lovely language, isn't it? For those of you that don't speak Somalian, she basically was saying that she is in Congress to defend the interests of Somalia, and that she is going to make sure that the United States will do things for Somalia first. That's kind of the bumper sticker version. It continued. I mean, it's
pause it. Like, do you know how do you know how motivated your reasoning has to be? To be like, wait, like not to have no skepticism aside from like, ugh, what a disgusting language. I meant it's a great sounding language.
But the sentiment is what I'm objecting to.
But the idea of like, she's admitted that she's in Congress to do the bidding of Somalia is shocking. Let's be clear. I mean, she was a refugee. She served in the Minnesota House as their whip, I think.
Yep.
I mean, the idea, she did all that to further the interests of Somalia, the country, to swallow that whole sort of like without any sort of like, hey, dude, before we run with this, can you just double check that we know what we're talking about? Like that someone just didn't write words in front of her speech?
I mean, we do this when we're talking about clips like covering Israel. We have to double, triple check to make sure that the translation of what they're saying is in matching what they are. And it's sometimes hard to figure out. And we won't run clips if we can't double check. But that, I mean,
yeah, but I'm saying listen to the language. It doesn't reading it.
Like, Dave,
listen to what
she speaks Somali.
What are the interests of Somalia? Like, what would she be doing in Congress that would be? I would love to have him ask him that question.
Things like food aid.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, we have a military presence in Africa that's
food
shadowy, but he probably can't name. He'll just say terrorism. Why? What is the terrorist group that you're referring to?
Pro-Somali food supplies.
Yeah.
Portion, obviously, of a much longer speech. This should come as no surprise to anyone that has been tracking this woman for quite some time. I mean, she absolutely is part of that Hamas caucus that the Democrats have. The progressives have completely gone off the deep end. Saying that you are in Congress to back another country is a problem, and that's your first priority. Here's some of the applause she got at the end.
waddanka Mareykankana kuma taageerayo dad kaleete in annaga ayna dhacaan
here just
marka taas ka seexda
not even getting
reer
translations
Minnesota gabadhii Congress u dirsateen way idinka war haysaa sida
I can translate for you. Hold on for a second. I can tell you what she said. She said we're going to use all of our Somali influence to bring the United States to its knees while it provides us food aid. Don't worry.
And anyone who opposes us will call them anti-African.
Yeah, there we go. We've nailed it.
I mean, we should be fair to Dave, right? Like, he did this exact same coverage when Representative Brian Mast, Republican from Florida, went onto into Capitol Hill wearing an IDF uniform.
We'll play that after we do his correction. All right, go ahead.
Congress u dirsateen way idinka war haysaa sidaad idinka
Minnesota. It reminds me of Minnesota of 20, 30 years ago, you know? Good old Minnesota. Kirby Puckett, the Twins. What else is from Minnesota? Give me something else from Minnesota, quick. What? The Timberwolves, Kevin Garnett, and Ilhan Omar and her band.
So
people who do not love America.
This is why like I take fascists and Nazis kind of seriously. Is growing up reading local news, whether it's in Fargo or Minnesota along I-94, is in the comment sections you would see any sort of story dealing with the Somali community in Minneapolis, the most atrocious racism, Somalia, just, and that was the polite things I can say. And Dave Rubin, it's a huge thing. Like when Dave Rubin's at the Minnesota that I remember, I don't know if he's ever been in Minnesota. Minnesota has a pretty diverse population for upper Midwestern city. There's a Hmong population that is there. Like the idea that like this was a white Minnesotan Ubermensch or something like that he's thinking of. Like, no, Minnesota always had diversity. There's a dark history of like genocide there with the Native American population, but like I don't know, it's so that the Minnesota I remember.
It's just full on racism.
Yeah,
he's such an idiot too. Like, remember Minnesota? All he could come up with was Kirby Puckett, who was just played on the Twins.
Yeah.
He probably wasn't even from Minnesota.
I mean, why is the Minnesota football team called the Vikings? Why is the Minnesota football team called the Vikings? Because there are a lot of Scandinavian immigrants that went to Minnesota, but they're white, so you don't hear him say the exact same thing about what happened to Minnesota. It's only because they're black and because some of the people in the audience wear headscarves.
And you know what else?
Disgusting.
You know what else? 30 years ago in Minnesota, 2 gay guys could not get married. In fact, 30 years ago in Minnesota, in the early 90s, is probably one of the scariest times to try and come out as a gay guy. In 90% of Minnesota, I would say.
Yeah.
Unless you were in the Twin Cities, and even then, it was probably pretty harrowing.
Yeah.
Never mind, you'd be able to get married and have kids. Yeah, I imagine he wouldn't want to return to that 30 years ago. But just so grotesque. Like, I'm just trying to think of in history if there has been if there's any precedent for a gay guy who might try and scapegoat other groups of people in society as their. Let's just listen more. I'll think more on this.
And are here to make it much, much worse. Now, why am I starting with that clip? Now, of course, in and of itself, there's a problem there, right? Like, there is a problem that members of Congress put other countries first. And it's just been very clear with this woman for quite some time. But what that really is coupled with...
Like, if it was so clear, wouldn't you take your bullet points and just go like, that time she got the Somali blankety blank legislation passed.
They overlooked the Somali nuclear program.
Or like all of a sudden the U.S. invested heavily in one of the Somali exports. Or like where is the clarity about how her career has been to promote Somali interests other than to bring, when she was on the Foreign Relations Committee and she kicked off, some notion of like human rights violations, which aren't exclusive, obviously, to Somalia. And I would imagine she has advocated for food aid for Somalia because they're so desperate in terms of food aid. But aside from that, like, where are the bullet points that he could put up there? It is so repulsive and naked. This blatant racism. Go ahead.
This woman for quite some time. But what that really is coupled with is what now has burst forth into, I think, truly the fight for the spirit of America. And if we do not get this one right, it's all over. And yes, I'm talking about the border and the intentional invasion that the Democrats and her brothers and sisters in the Progressive Party, which have completely decimated the same Democrats, have ushered in. So that's where we're going to be spending much of the show. Real quick before we get to that.
Much of it. I've got really nothing left. I got my presidential candidate kind of flamed out.
He goes on and talks about how the squad is similarly.
There's a tiny bit more.
At the end of this ad for Rumble, which doesn't. I don't quite follow which country they have allegiances to.
You want to see a little bit?
Wait, do we have more?
Just a little bit here.
Use code RUMBLE30 at trulyoffice.com/rumble and take control of your digital workspace today. That's RUMBLE30 at trulyoffice.com/rumble. You won't want to miss out. And now back to me. Okay, so look, we can show you videos of Ilhan Omar talking about her allegiance to Somalia, and clearly she does not have anything in line with what most of us would call American values. And she has ushered this stuff in. A whole
she's
bunch
not
of us have been warning
American.
about it. It's not just her. It's virtually all of the progressives. It's AOC. It's Rashida Tlaib, all of them. But that aside for the moment, the bigger problem, yeah, it is a problem when you have people who hate America in Congress. I will grant you that. But the bigger problem on the ground at the moment, because it is bursting forth and we don't know where the F these people are, is that in the last 3 years, about 6 million people have come into.
Yeah.
Landra City said Dave Rubin is a gay man who stared long into the void. And now the void is staring back.
That'd be terrifying. You stare into a void and then all of a sudden John Voight's face.
Yeah, exactly.